Redditors who were born deaf but gained hearing later on in life, what did the voice in your head sound like? TLDR, there isn't one. I was born deaf and gained some hearing after a child. But it was always very difficult for me. People used to have to carry a giant microphone and a speaker-type box that would transmit to my box into a contraption set up around my ears. I hated it, got made fun of it a lot. My parents refused to let me learn sign language. I suffered through 14 years of speech therapy learning to talk without hearing sounds properly. So my speech even gets made fun of today. When I was 12 they found some blockages around the bones in my ears. They did surgery but my hearing got so much worse. When I was 18 I got my first digital hearing aids for the first time. It cost my dad a lot. Hearing aids aren't considered medical. I heard a leaf crack a bit later that day. I legit freaked out about it and couldn't believe it made a sound. I still to this day am in awe at simple sounds. My hearing got much better after my heart transplant earlier this year too. I love opera and violins. It sounds very pleasant for my aids. Dogs barking however hurts them now. Rushed the answer a bit into a story but yeah the voice in my head is weird. I don't really think there is one. It is weird. I think in memories pretty much. So I can hear sounds when I think and recall, but they are so very faint and almost non-noticeable. But, if they are, it's usually based upon a memory of someone making the noise or sound. Guy here who was born deaf and then got cochlear implants. My voice can be both English sentences and silent visualization, imagination. It can switch between one and the other. Sometimes when I daydream it can be so vivid that the real world falls away completely. My cousin was born deaf and went through an operation to recover part of his hearing when he was 12. He sometimes uses hearing aids but can get by without them in general. His family had a bunny, Tuyu. Of course he had learned about cows mooing, cats meowing etc. before he had his surgery. He was very shocked when he came home and greeted his bunny that it made no sound. It took the longest time for him to understand that bunnies are pretty quiet animals in general. He explained he thought all pets were loud. Hey there, are you subscribed yet? Please do. Also leave a like on this video to help out the channel. My old roommate in NYC got implants at, I think he was 25 or 26, he was shocked that the radiators in the house didn't make noise, he could feel them, and was absolutely sure, given their shaking and vibrating from time to time, that they were going to be quite noisy. On the flip side, he was deeply annoyed by the buzz of fluorescent lighting, which he did not expect to make noise. People keep bringing up a voice in your head. Does it literally sound like you're talking to yourself in your brain? Like, you hear it. I just have thoughts and it's more like I'm reading them. Is this not a typical experience? I was born profoundly deaf to high-pitched sounds, so I have trouble discerning sounds like S, T, C, M, N without lip reading. This means that without my hearing aids, I don't often hear birds. I know what they sound like now but I get it sometimes that I hear a bird whistling and I point it out to my friends which to them it is a regular occurrence and I think it gets a good laugh out of them. It's also funny when I repeat what someone said but I misheard them so it's completely the opposite of what they said. I had an aunt who had severe disability in hearing. She could hear a plane flying in the sky, to give an idea. She never spoke, but was able to make sounds. Since she was born in mid-40s, there was literally no help available to her or to the family to deal with the issue. She ended up not learning how to speak, but was able to communicate with sign language. This however was no standard sign language, which meant she could only communicate to her close relatives. It was very sad to find that, if she was given support, she could have learned how to speak, but this is just a guess. She passed away in 2009. Not 100% what you asked, but thought people might find the anecdote interesting. The lack of an internal voice can happen much earlier than gaining hearing in adulthood. I had a string of ear infections as a child that led to my being mostly deaf through my prime language development time frame, up until about 3 after which it was rectified medically and I caught up developmentally with my peers. To this day I think in pictures or movies. I can force an internal voice but it isn't my default thinking mechanism. The voice sounds like my normal voice, but slightly deeper. This is a really interesting question. I don't have any issues with hearing but I've never had a voice in my head. Anyone else? I'm glad you are enjoying this video. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. Not deaf, but there are people who don't think with an inner voice. I only have an inner voice in very specific situations. When I really want to remember something, like a to-do list, I will actively choose to talk it out loud, in my head. But in most other situations my thoughts are not vocalized. Thinking about making a coffee? I see the empty mug, think about the coffee machine in the kitchen, see it, go there, fill it up, might remember that I earlier saw the empty cleaner bottle. We'll add cleaner to the list for grocery shopping. I am a very visual thinker. Many people, though not the majority, have no inner monologue. I have no idea how they get through the day. My inner monologue discusses everything with me all the time. So, I have been deaf on my right ear for as long as I can remember due to a meningitis at the age of 9 months. I've grown up normally, as in learning how to speak and understanding people, so I didn't have any major disadvantages compared to other kids. There are a few however. 1. I am unable to figure out where a person is speaking from, if I have my eyes closed or they're out of my view. 2. If there's a lot of background noise I have a lot of trouble understanding someone even if I'm directly speaking to them. 3. If somebody's speaking too loud I hear what they are saying but I don't understand it. Also, I will always try to position myself on the right of someone so I can understand them properly. For some reason some people, my brother, are annoyed by this. Now, I have always been against the idea of getting an implant, but recently my mom and a couple doctors convinced to check if I can get one. I might be unable to, as my cochlea could be inflexible. I am honestly wondering how it feels to hear on the right, if there will be a major difference, and also be able to hear music stereo, which is according to my friends one of the most amazing feelings there is. Cold sweat smile. It wasn't scary at the time but it was a lot like blood-curdling screaming, breaking teeth, choking and endless nails scratching a chalkboard but I could understand it. Not a voice, but text. Granted, I'm not completely deaf, so why MMV? As far as I understand this isn't very easy to answer. Many people actually don't think with a voice, but actually just pictures and other similar things. I'm not deaf but I lost my voice, surgery gone wrong, about 5 years ago. The voice in my head is my old voice, unamused. I got very interested when I saw this post. Then I saw there were no comments. I could have always heard, but until I was 6 years old, I was semi-deaf because there was a lot of stuff, I don't remember what it was, in my ear which blocked most noises. So I always just heard some noises instead of words. When the stuff got removed it was like a whole new world. And I also got better at speaking thanks to it. I have Gordon Freeman narrating my life in my head. I have no voice in my head, I think in images, but first time I wore hearing aids I jumped a lot as touching my face and hair made a sound. Standing up made a sound. The door opening made a sound. The weird noises turned out to be birdsong. My favorite is I can now hear the sound a smile makes when I wear hearing aids. I'm not deaf but I don't have a voice in my head, I just speak aloud whenever I have a thought. Quote. My friend was born to deaf parents, but they were deaf through accident so it wasn't hereditary. His parents didn't know he wasn't deaf because they never thought to check. So he learned to speak from their Surinamese cleaning lady, meaning he got a Surinamese accent although he was born in California. He got picked on early on in life because people thought he was making fun of Surinamese people, but in reality, that was just how he learned to speak. Not me, but my friend said that he would visualize the words in his head. He described it as his own handwriting, but white with black outlines. From what I have read here this seems very unusual. Wait, you really a voice when thinking? I was not born deaf but I always thought it was just a way of saying. Not the target of the question, but just read some of the comments and did not find an example of what I do. I have images, visual understandings, connection of correlation, and my inner voice, also a persona voice, that is a part of the collective me. Assuming most people here aren't familiar with aphantasia, which is the inability to form a mental image or the complete absence of internal monologue. Many people that suffer from aphantasia report that their thoughts are more like impulses and their memories akin to being like a filing system through which they access information. I can hear all my life, the voice doesn't have a sound. I can hear but for one of the people with internal monologue, it's not monologue it's dialogue or trialogue and if I completely silence all logs I hear music, either heavy metal or hip-hop beats, sometimes orchestra but that's rarer of the musics. Also if I actively decide what the voices will sound like I'll have a monologue that does impeccable impressions, and it will sound like that until I decide otherwise. I heard that some people don't dream or they can't daydream no ability to use their imagination. It's strange to think they can't, I wonder what those non-working imagination folks do in life. Grew up without hearing in childhood, ditto on initially thinking in images and conceptually. It's almost like an innate, animalistic way of understanding meaning and very hard to describe literally. I think this is also why I was called an animal whisperer as a kid because it came naturally for me to read body language easily. My mind works similar to when you're in a dream. There's no real inner dialogue, usually imagery, emotions, physical sensations. I could use words and speech to describe something but it wasn't my initial go-to. I also heavily prefer writing over a verbal dialogue, and have a vague imagery of captioning in my mind when people speak, since I rely on it so heavily for everything. When I read books or text there's a sound of speech in my head but primarily the meaning of the words is conveyed visually and innately, rather than verbally. If somebody says brontosaurs I hear the word faintly and see the image of the dinosaur in my head. I developed an internal monologue later on that I think is an imitation of my own voice. But much nicer sounding than in reality